Hi friends, Miles here, and in this video I finally want to share with you my thoughts on the Digitakt and the Digitone combo. If you are following this channel, you might know that in the last couple of years I have been extensively using this combo to not only write music but to also perform live music and to just play a lot on these two instruments. So I thought all the experiences that I gathered in this time I want to share in this video here with you. The video basically has three parts. The first one is about the pros and cons of this combo. The second one is about my future wishes and the final verdict. And then the third is a little bit of a bonus part, because here I want to talk about the newly released Syntakt and how it might integrate into this setup. Now, quick disclaimer that I don't own a Syntakt, but I talk to a lot of people who do own one, and I watched, of course, a lot of videos about it. And yeah, I'm just sharing here my personal thoughts on how it might integrate into the workflow. Another disclaimer, these are of course just my personal thoughts. So if you disagree with them, that's of course totally fine. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this combo. But also if you agree with them, I'm happy to read your comments and what you think about this combo. Now, without further ado, let's get right into the pros and cons. My first pro on this combo is that it's very easy to set up together both audio and MIDI device. So you can already see here what's going on. It's actually pretty straightforward. The two outputs of the Digitone are going into the inputs of the Digitakt. And from there, the audio signal is going, the outputs are going right into my mixer, which is over there. And then MIDI device, you have also just one cable. So the Digitakt is sending MIDI information to the Digitone to control it, to send clock. I will get more into detail about that a little bit later. But yeah, this is all that you need to set this up together. Very easy, very straightforward. And for me, it's a big change because it makes making music a lot easier and very fast. The second pro is that controlling the Digitone via the Digitakt works just great and is very, very easy. So I just already said it, the start-stop function is super easy. So when I hit play on the Digitakt, the Digitone automatically starts to play too. And also the pattern changes work very smoothly. So when I queue up a new pattern on the Digitone, on the Digitakt, it automatically switches also then on the Digitone, which is of course very, very helpful. And also globally muting the Digitone's tracks on the Digitakt is very easy. There's an option on the Digitakt which you can use to enable this function, and I set it so that the MIDI channels 9 to 12 on the Digitakt actually mute the channels 1 to 4 on the Digitone. So I can do all my mute controls for the Digitakt and the Digitone's channels all on the Digitakt, so on one device, which makes it in live performance situation a lot of easier. And setting all of that up actually didn't take me long. I just looked it up on YouTube, found a good tutorial by Eva Triti, shout out again. And this was all I needed to set it up, and now I'm good to go, and it's very easy and very straightforward. My pro number 3 on these two devices is structure. So all in all, you have 12 tracks available on the Digitakt and the Digitone. 8 on the Digitakt and then 4 additional tracks on the Digitone. And for me, having a clear structure makes my workflow so much easier. So for example, I set all of these tracks up that they are meant to have a specific instrument on them. So for example, track number 1 always is the kick drum, track number 2 always is the snare, track number 3 always is the closed hi-hat, and then on the Digitone, for example, track number 1 always is the bass. So this makes my setup very immediate to access. So whenever I get anything running, I know exactly where to put my elements, and it just speeds up my workflow, which is a big, big plus for me. Also in live situations, it's so much easier because I all the time know exactly which elements are on which tracks. So for example, I want to take out in my jams the kick. I know that I need to mute track number 1 on all of my tracks. If I want to take out the bass, then I know that I need to mute track number 9 on the Digitakt. And this all adds up to making it very accessible and easy for me not only to compose music but also to live perform with this combo. Pro number 4 is the ease of use and the feeling of playing one device. What do I mean by that? So basically for me, I don't look at this combo as two different instruments, but rather a little bit more than one machine which has sampling and synthesizer capabilities. And this for me makes it much easier to compose my music, to come up with ideas, to know, okay, I have more of a sample-oriented section here on the Digitakt, and then for all the melodic stuff, I mainly use the Digitone. And the good thing about this combo is that I have the feeling that Elektron is proactively pushing this. So for example, a lot of controls on these machines are very similar, and with the recent Digitone firmware update also they adjusted the LFOs so that now you have two LFOs on both machines which look exactly the same. Of course they have different destinations, but still you really get the feeling that using these two machines is just very immediate and straightforward. You know exactly where to reach, as the setup on both machines is pretty similar, and that makes it for me much easier and faster to compose music and come up with good ideas. Pro number 5 for me is the option to route the Digitone into the Digitakt. This was just introduced, I think it was the latest firmware update for the Digitakt, that you can finally route audio into the inputs of the Digitakt. And this really changed the workflow with these two machines and gives you two big advantages. The first one is that you can now use the Elektron Digitakt's compressor on the signals from the Digitone as well. So for example, you route the Digitone into the Digitakt and then can use the compressor as kind of like a master compressor for these two devices, which is obviously a big plus. And the second good reason why to route it that way is that you now are able to sample sounds from the Digitone into the Digitakt, which is for me a big game changer. So for example, when I have a nice section going on the Digitone, I sometimes just sample it into the Digitakt to use the sampling capabilities, flip the sample, chop it up, and really come up with some additional creative ideas. And it also gives me then the option to free up some space on the Digitone to use the 4 melodic tracks for something else. And these workflow improvements are a big plus for me on this combo. Pro number 6 is compact size and portability. I mean, you can already see it here. This setup is pretty portable. You can just take the two machines anywhere you want to go. And it's for me great to have this option to take it to another studio, to maybe a live gig in the future. And to have everything I need in this two small machines. And another great advantage of that is, of course, that you can take either of these machines with you. So for example, a couple of time ago I went on a business trip and took the Digitakt with me, and I started composing a new jam with adding the percussive elements on the Digitakt, and I knew when I'm back home and can hook these two up together, I can then add the melodic parts of the Digitone, but I already have a percussive foundation. Works of course also the other way around, but just to have the portability and this option is just, for me, for this combo, a huge plus. And the last pro for me is to have the option to extend this combo also by additional instruments. So you can see here that these two inputs on the Digitone are right now unused, and you can of course hook up additional instruments to these inputs, which is a big plus. I, for example, in one of my recent jams, I will link it somewhere up here, I routed my guitar into the input of the Digitone and then used it together with this combo. And what's really nice about this is that you can on the input use the internal effects of the Digitone. So for my guitar I added chorus from the Digitone, I added delay, I added reverb, and this really makes it very versatile to connect different instruments to this combo and then use it all together. But of course, this combo isn't perfect, so let's take a look at my cons of the Digitone and the Digitakt combo. The first one definitely is limitations. No matter how you tweak it, how much you sample from the Digitone into the Digitakt, in the end you only have 12 tracks in total available. And if you compare that to a DAW, for example, where you sometimes have projects with up to 40, 50 or even more tracks, that's of course a big limitation and really forces you to be creative, to think outside of the box and make the best use of the tracks available. My second con is realizing that this combo is not one device. Now, this might sound a little bit controversial because in the Pro section I said that this works together great as thinking of it as one device, but there are some things that really get you back to thinking, okay, these are definitely two separate machines. One big example or one big downside for me that I struggle with is, for example, the fill mode. You have fill mode on both machines, and to enter that you need to basically hold down the page button on both machines. I would love to have the option to just do it on the Digitakt, because whenever I use fill mode, and I mostly use it for transitions in my music, I need to perform a little weird hand angle or just use both of my hands, which means that I don't have another hand free to perform some additional things like opening a filter or whatever it is. And that's for me a big downside and a real limitation where I think, okay, this is definitely two separate devices, but not one device. Downside number 3 is there is no pattern mute mode available to control the Digitone's mutes. What do I mean by that? So in generally, I set this setup up that the Elektron Digitakt controls the mutes on the Digitone, but this only works in global mode, which means that whenever you're changing patterns, the mutes will stay exactly the same. So saying that you mute the kick and the bass on the first pattern and then switch to the second pattern, they will also be muted on the second one. But Elektron on both machines has the option to basically have pattern mute modes, which means you can store in the pattern different mute options. So when you switch the pattern, that these two are then basically different in the next pattern that you're going to. But unfortunately, when controlling the mutes from the Digitakt, it's not possible to do that on both machines, which I sometimes would really love to have because it makes performance and planning of performance way easier for me. But it just, doesn't work, and that's obviously a big downside for me. Downside number 4 for me is pattern length limitations. Now, I've already said this in my review of the Digitone, which I will link you again somewhere up here if you want to rewatch it, but it of course also counts for both devices together. All in all, you just have in the sequencer 64 steps available, which definitely is a big limitation. There are a couple of workarounds to extend this a little bit, to work kind of like with a different size of the grid. You could basically say to extend it by 128 steps, but still for longer melody lines it's a big downside, and I like to really have longer chord progressions to go on, so I need to get again creative and work with trick locks on the different sequencers to get my melodies and chord progressions the way I want them to be. But just out of the box, keep in mind that these two machines per pattern only have 64 steps available, which for me definitely is a downside. And con number 5 is that both machines don't have a song mode. This is something that I sometimes would really like to have. Both machines have available pattern chaining, and of course you can in live performance just switch patterns, but you don't have a dedicated song mode, which I would sometimes really find handy, but it's not available, and something you need to keep in mind when considering getting either one of these two devices or both devices together. And this already brings me to the next section, which is future wishes and final verdict. So some of the wishes are of course a little bit repeating now from the cons section, but the first one definitely is to have, for me, the option to trigger fill mode just from the Digitakt and don't have to press also the page button on the Digitone. The second one is to have the pattern mute mode available on both devices hooked up together, which would be awesome. And the third one, really important for me, would be to have a longer sequencer. Now, all of these all of these wishes. I'm not really sure if Elektron will or can add these in a future firmware update. I'm sure most of them they won't, but yeah, it would just be something for me that I would really wish to have for the future, and yeah, to perfectly round up this combo. And also, just looking at the Digitone, it would be nice to be able to use the ARP of the Digitone on the MIDI tracks. Right now you can use the arpeggiator only on the internal tracks, but yeah, for me it would be awesome, maybe in the future, looking at some other gear, like for example a Moog synthesizer would be amazing to sequence this via the Digitone and then being able to use the arpeggiator on the MIDI tracks, which currently is not possible. And this already brings me to the final verdict. So do all the pros that I mentioned outweigh the cons, and is the Digitone and Digitakt combo basically a good combo I can recommend? And I can clearly say yes, absolutely. I love this combo, and although it only has 12 tracks, I can really get something out of it that for me is release worthy. I also shared the jams that I programmed on these machines on Spotify and other streaming services, and yeah, it's just a general sound that I achieve that I really like in general, and for me is totally worth sharing with the world. But most importantly for me, these two devices are just so much fun to play. I really love to get going with them. I love to make music, to get creative, to compose my ideas, and getting more and more into the workflow really made this become better and better for me, and I just love going with it. And my setup here is super immediate now, which I totally appreciate. I just turn these two devices on, then I switch on my mixer, put up my headphones, and then I'm basically good to go. While in the past, when I was using a DAW, I needed to boot up my computer, then get the DAW going, decide which project to work on, which sounds to load in. It just felt more like actual work, while this here really feels for me like making music, and most importantly, having a lot of fun. Now it comes to the question if adding a Syntakt to this combo makes any sense. And of course you might think it's quite obvious, because the Syntakt has the same form factor as these two machines, and also Elektron marketings it in a way that they present these three now as the holy trinity for making music. My initial thoughts on that without owning a Syntakt, of course, are I think it could be very cool, especially when you want to layer sounds, because this is something I really miss here with this combo, because on the Digitone, when I like to layer my melodies, I always need to use two tracks, which is of course then, or leaves you just with two additional tracks, which is definitely a big limitation. So for layering sounds, I think the Syntakt could be absolutely a great option. And also it adds of course a lot of new sonic capabilities with all these different digital and analog sound machines that the Syntakt comes with. I think it's in general a very nice addition to the setup, and can really make your jams sound a little different when just using, or compared to just using this combo. On the other side, of course, it can also, I think, lead to overproducing a track, because then with the Syntakt you suddenly not only have 12 but 24 tracks available, which can fast get into overproducing a track and having too much elements into it. So I think if I would have a Syntakt right now, I don't have one, but if I would have one, I think I would make it from song to song dependent. So really saying that now when I'm making music, I'm using all of the 12 tracks, but I think with the Syntakt and all the 24 tracks available, I think I wouldn't all the time use all the tracks. So sometimes maybe I would just use 20, sometimes just 18, just 14, just really depends on what the song needs. But this of course is then a big plus to have this option to think, okay, some of the sounds might need a little extra boost, so I can easily layer them up with using another track of the 24 that I in general have available. There is, by the way, a great video by Matt, aka EasyBot, who is discussing exactly this topic, how the Syntakt integrates into the workflow with the Digitone and Digitakt. I watched it and it's really good. It's worth watching. He did a great job there comparing that. Shout out, buddy. And I linked the video down in the description, so if you want to watch it as well. But yeah, in general, I have to say I would really like to try this combo and also see how, for example, the Syntakt integrates into my setup also using the microcosm, because the microcosm is the effects pedal I currently use on my melodic tracks, and I think it would be really interesting to hear the sound machines of the Syntakt running through the microcosm and seeing what comes out in the end. I would love to play around with that. Maybe sometime in the future, let's see. And yeah, that wraps up my thoughts on the Digitone and Digitakt combo. I hope that you found it useful. If you did, I would really appreciate a sub to the channel or a like or a comment to the video, because it really helps me. And now I of course want to hear your thoughts. What do you think on this combo? Do you think it's a good combo? What parts of the combo are you missing? What do you find not so good? What do you really like about it? Please feel free to share your thoughts with me in the comment. I would really like to hear them, and to hear how you experience making music with these devices. Oh, and if you already own a Syntakt, I would of course love to hear your thoughts. If you're using the three of them together, how you like it, how you think they work together, that would be much appreciated. Yeah, and like always, thanks a lot for watching. Appreciate all of you lovely people out there. I'm wishing you an awesome day. Keep making music, stay creative, and I see you in the next one. Peace.